The Aggies have a top 10 wide receiver room in the nation.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in the Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. And today we're going to be talking a little bit more about this wide receiver room the Aggies have. We've been talking about for weeks how good it can be, but On3 came out with a list that really broke down why it's going to be so good and why it was top 10 in the country. The reason the Aggies wide receiver room is going to be top 10 in the country, it was ranked number 8 according to a list by On3 that just came out recently, is because you have 3 guys who could be wide receiver ones at some other schools and potentially a 4th. Ainias Smith, Musa Muhammad, Evan Stewart, and Noah Thomas. This wide receiver room is deep and full of outstanding talent. You know, a lot of schools like Ohio State is known for their wide receiver room. And of course, they have some outstanding wide receivers this season. But the thing about it is, the depth the Aggies have, it compares to teams like that because there are so many players that could be the wide receiver one on this team. You know, I've seen so many different people have opinions on who's going to lead this team in receiving. We had a whole episode on this. I said Evan Stewart. I saw lots of comments saying Muhammad. I saw lots of comments saying Ainias Smith. Then I see another list. ESPN put out their top 10 wide receivers in the country. Now, no Aggies were on this list, but of the first honorable mention receiving votes, Ainias Smith was tied for basically 11th in essence with 2 other receivers. So there's been high praise for Evan Stewart. There's been high praise for Ainias Smith. There's been high praise for Musa Muhammad. I've seen a lot of positivity surrounding Noah Thomas. So I guess to really break down the premise of this is that the Aggie offense can be outstanding this year thanks to these guys. You know, it's not often that a school has 3 definitely, potentially 4, depending on if Noah Thomas breaks out, like I think and many others think he might. It's not very often a school has 4 wide receivers that could go a lot of places and be the wide receiver one. And I think, too, another thing that speaks to this Aggie receiver room is the fact that there are so many different opinions. You know, a lot of the times, you see a school and they'll have an outstanding wide receiver. Of course, he's going to be the main guy. With the Aggies, there is a world where all 4 of the names that I have just recently been talking about these last couple minutes could be the Aggies' leading receiver this season. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, there's another world where each of these guys could have 600 yards or one, Evan Stewart has 1,000 and Muhammad and Ainias Smith have 600 and 700 and Noah Thomas has 500. These guys can play off each other. They have different skill sets. They're different styles of receiver. And I think that is what can make this room so outstanding. And it's a snowball effect, okay? Because you break down this offense. Coach Petrino, one of the biggest, things he likes to do is spread the ball around, whether it's to tight ends, receivers, using multiple running backs. He likes to spread the ball around and use his weapons. And he has a offense that is really friendly to quarterbacks and receivers. He runs a lot of 6-yard hitches and 10-yard outs and routes that are easy to get open. It's easy to complete these passes. And Coach Petrino runs a lot of routes like that. So, when you run routes like that, sometimes it's going to hurt your yards per catch. So, a guy like Stewart, if his average depth of target is 8 yards, I'm sure that's a massive decrease from last season in Coach Petrino's offense. That can be part of what happens here. Now, he's going to get it down the field. Coach Petrino's going to work the ball down the field as well. It's not going to be ding and dunk. But I do think there's going to be a lot of easy connections, easy throws, easy passes. And I think that's going to help a quarterback like Connor Wegman settle in. And that's one of the reasons I've been very high on Wegman this year. There's two reasons I've been high on Wegman. One, I think the offensive line is going to be better this year. Two, I think he has one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country. And, of course, On3 agrees with my take on that because they put him number 8 in the nation. So I think that this Aggie offense has a chance to be great. And all of those pieces have to click, but I think that's what Coach Petrino is going to do for this team. I think he's going to make it easy on these wideouts, easy on the quarterback, easy on the running backs and the offensive line. It's not a complicated system. It's a system that these players, these young guys, obviously Ainias Smith's an older player, and you've got some older players on the offense, but for a lot of these young guys that have been part of these recent talented recruiting classes, they can really settle in to what Coach Petrino wants to do, and it's not going to be difficult. It's not hard concepts to pick up. I saw a joke one time, and I forget. I wish I remember who said this, but talking about Coach Fisher's offense being like the Cheesecake Factory menu, which is really, really funny. But I mean, it's true. I mean, it's a deep playbook Coach Fisher ran. So you go down to what Coach Petrino is going to do, and it's going to be easier concepts for these players to learn. And I think the offense in and of itself is going to be more successful. But the wide receiver room was great last year. Some of these, injuries happened. Evan Stewart was young. Noah Thomas was kind of developing into the guy he is, and still developing into the guy he's going to be. So a lot of things kind of had to fall into place that really didn't last year. Smith obviously went down with the injury. Only I think played 4 games last season. So a lot of things didn't go the Aggies' way, and part of it had to do with Coach Fisher's play calling. And I think with Coach Petrino calling the plays, calling the shots, and using this offense more effectively and being smarter with these outstanding skill position players that he has, I think this wide receiver room could live up to the hype that it is now receiving on a national level. We see this a lot. A position group for a school will get some high praise, and then something will happen. You have an injury, a player doesn't live up to the hype. Different things can occur that just kind of leads to a team or a position group not being as successful as many would have imagined. And I don't think that's going to be the case this year for the Aggies as long as everybody in this wide receiver room stays healthy. If those 4 guys stay healthy, I think this receiving game could be deadly scary for opposing defensive back rooms when you have a second-year Connor Wegman with Coach Petrino calling the plays. I think it's going to succeed. I think it's going to be a great system. And this wide receiver room, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a room that is going to help this team excel. I'll sometimes see people talk about balance. You want to have a balanced roster where there's talent spread throughout all positions, and I think that's the case with this Aggie roster. But having a room like a wide receiver room that is just flat out easy to be excited about, I see that in the defensive line room as well for the Aggies. There's lots of position groups that this team is deep at. Quarterback 2 with Max Johnson backing up Wegman. There's a lot of depth on this team, and that's part of why me and many people and some in the national media are so high on Texas A&M this season. So you just got to think if Coach Petrino's offense does what we think it's going to do, this team, including these wide receivers, could be outstanding in 2023. LSU or South Carolina? It's a fun debate to have. Let's talk about that. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. There's a lot of fun going on right now. MLB, the Rangers are hot right now. You got your NBA playoffs. The Heat tied the series. You got NHL playoffs. Haven't been keeping up with that. I don't know what the series is, but there's a lot of good sports going on. There's futures bets if you're interested in that kind of stuff. There's lots of betting opportunities right now for those who are interested and enjoy sports betting. So there is no better place to bet all playoff action than America's #1 sports book. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. It's starting to become more official. It's starting to become more official when it comes to what this new SEC landscape is going to look like. And I know we've talked a good amount about this. It's going to be official. Everything I've heard on June 14th, there's going to be some kind of like broadcast where they fully explain everything. But, we have a pretty good picture of what this new SEC is going to look like. And depending on the type of fan you are, there's reason to be concerned. The first time that we talked about this, that we brought up the realignment, we were talking about the Lone Star Showdown potentially not being a yearly occurrence, which it's looking like is going to be the situation here. But what I think hurts the Aggies the most, I love rivalries. I said it when we talked about that, how much rivalries make college football fun, make it the great sport it is. But at the end of the day, you know what I love more than rivalries? Winning football games. And, I didn't really think about that at first when we first had that conversation. I was thinking about how bad I want the Texas A&M game back. And then there were a few comments on YouTube that, they really opened up my eyes saying, Texas is in a good spot right now. Do we really want to mess with them every year and have that be a game every year on the schedule that's going to be a tough game to win? It's a dang good point, especially with the expansion coming to the college football playoff, to where there's going to be more teams in the college football playoff. There's room for teams that are, 9-3 to potentially make a run in the college football playoff. And that's why I don't mind staying away from the Longhorns on a year-to-year basis. But the question mark here is, does this hurt the Aggies when it comes to going from South Carolina as your permanent opponent to LSU? I don't know how you can sit here and say the answer to that's no. You look at this, South Carolina, I have the numbers here. South Carolina, the Aggies are, of course, 8-1 all time against the Gamecocks, with the one loss being last year, which, I'm not going to say throw it out the window, but you get what I'm going at. Last year was horrendous. 8-1 all time, okay? It's a team Texas A&M's handled. It's pretty much been a game you can chop down as a victory before the season even starts. Now, I've talked about the Gamecocks a little bit. I do think they're on the come up. I like Coach Beamer. I think he's doing a good job over there. I think that team could be good this year. I don't think the Aggies are going to really struggle to take care of business against the Gamecocks, but I do think that's a program on its way up. But your permanent opponent, of course, with the divisions kind of being no more in this new SEC landscape, your permanent opponent, all the reporting has it as LSU. Of course, LSU won the SEC West last year, went to the SEC championship game. And to me, it's like, you don't want any part of that, every single year. Now, of course, when Texas A&M and LSU were in the West, it was every year occurrence anyway. But now that these divisions are gone, there's no more, East, West, and all that. So it's like, I'd rather the Aggies' permanent opponent be Vandy, or maybe Missouri, or Kentucky, or somebody, or South Carolina, somebody that's not going to be in trouble. Because I want the Aggies to win a national championship. I want the Aggies to be competing for SEC championships on a year-to-year basis. And let's call a spade. Having to play LSU every single year as your permanent opponent instead of South Carolina, that's a downgrade. Now, it makes sense as to how this, landscape would change with Texas and Oklahoma joining. Things were going to happen. Stuff was going to have to be changed up to be able to make this all work. But at the end of the day, it's like, now I get there's some people out there. It kind of reminds me of when my pops used to, one thing. Let me preface this better. My dad never let me win when we played basketball. No, and there were times I was ready to scissor kick a wall, but kind of turned me. I'd say it turned me into the competitor I am today, whether it's playing cornhole or whatever it is, and. So you can make that argument. You could say, if we want to be the best, we got to beat the best. Okay, I agree with you. I think that is kind of how a lot of good things happen in life, is you kind of have to learn how to beat the best. And so you could say, Andrew, I wish the Aggies were playing Alabama and Texas and Georgia every single year, because if we can beat all them, I get that. If some people have that opinion, that take on this, I support you, because I don't disagree with that. But then you have to ask yourselves, what would you rather have happen? Would you rather have those games against the best teams every single year, if Texas A&M has to play Alabama and Georgia and Texas and LSU every year? Or would you rather be an easier schedule where the Aggies can win football games and compete for national championships? That's where I'm at. So it's a debate. It's a question that there's lots of different opinions here. People can think different ways on this, and I get it. I get all sides of this. I don't really disagree with, like I said, those who want to do it like that. I mean, I think the only thing I've ever beaten my dad at is mini golf, and that's the sad reality of my life. But aside from that, you know what I mean? It's like playing the best makes you the best. I get that, but I do think the Aggies, this schedule where having to play LSU every year as your permanent rival, I'm not a fan of that. I wish it was a team like South Carolina. I think it just leads to more victories. So, as I've seen some other hosts on the Locked On Podcast Network kind of talking about this SEC realignment stuff, and I've seen those different opinions to where some say, well, we don't mind this because we kind of get away from having to play these teams every year. And that's what kind of changed my mind on this, because like I said, at first I was really pro bring back the Lone Star Showdown. Let's play Texas every year. Let's do it. It's going to be fun, because it would be fun. But at the end of the day, now that it looks like that's not going to be a reality, you got to say, at least the Aggies have a chance. You want the Aggies to win football games. And I think it stinks that Texas A&M is going to have to play LSU as a permanent opponent instead of South Carolina, even though, I get it. It's the get rid of the divisions. You were playing LSU regardless because they were in the West, but now that the divisions were gone, you could have hoped you kind of got a cupcake of an SEC team, and that's not the reality here. That's probably going to be the last time that we really break down this whole conference realignment stuff. I'm curious your all's thoughts. If you disagree, do you all want to play Texas and Bama and Georgia every single year? And, of course, the Aggies are still going to play those teams. It's just going to be more, you switch up who you play on a year to year. Your schedule's going to look different more often than it does now. So I'm curious your all's thoughts. Like, would you want to play better teams? The iron sharpens iron. I think that's the saying. You see what I'm saying? So is that your all's take on it? Or are you with me and saying, I wish our permanent opponent was somebody that we'd be in a better position to win more football games? Let me know what you all think on that. Because like I said, my opinion changed on the matter after some comments on that video talking about the Lone Star Showdown that I think were great points and really changed my mind on the matter. So like I said, on June 14th, there is some kind of, I don't really know what it is yet, but in essence, it's like a broadcast where they're going to fully break down what's going on with the SEC. So we'll talk about it more when that happens. But we'll see. It's a new world. It is a new world of SEC football, and it's going to be fun to see how this all plays out for the Aggies and for the rest of the SEC. The Aggies dropped their game against Stanford, which means there is one more win-or-go-home game between these two ball clubs. Yep, that's right. The Aggies dropped the game to Stanford. It was a painful one. The pitching, the bats didn't put up enough. Shootouts happen. Sometimes shootouts happen, and the bats have to be able to stay in the shootout. That wasn't the case for Texas A&M in this ball game. Stanford kind of just ran away. And what killed me in this game is crooked numbers. Crooked numbers are the worst thing that you can do as a defense, as a pitching staff. You can't allow crooked numbers. Stanford had innings where they scored 7 runs and they scored 4 runs. Stanford only scored in 3 innings. They only scored in 3 innings, but you had a 7-run inning, a 7 spot, and a 4 spot. That's going to kill you. Crooked numbers make it hard to win baseball games. The other thing that killed the Aggies in this game was that The Aggies scored 4 runs in the bottom of the first inning to take so Stanford started off the scoring with 2 in the top of the first. The Aggies come back with a 4 spot in the bottom of the first. That is when you answer. The pitching staff needs to go out there and shut it down. You answered the bill. You answered the phone call. You said we put you. You score a couple. We score a couple more, and then you go back out on the top of the second, and that is when Stanford put up the 4 spot to then take the 6-4 lead over the Aggies, and then of course the 7 spot happens, and that's when it spiraled. But I guess the way to sum this, the pitching, the part of the pitching that frustrated me in this game was, the walks, 5 walks, that won't kill you. 16 hits will kill you, especially when you give up a few free bases. But what killed me was the amount of pitches that were just right down the middle. Part of pitching to me, I always explain it as there's pitching and there's throwing. A lot that we see nowadays in college baseball, I think there's a lot more throwing than there used to be. And that's part of guys throwing 117 million miles per hour compared to back in the day when your average fastball in the professional baseball was 90 miles per hour. So that to me there's like I said, there's the throwers and there's the pitchers. I think the Aggies have a handful of throwers and a handful of pitchers. A lot of guys with high velocity fastballs, and when you get behind in the count, you just kind of flutter one down the middle. That's what happened in the Grand Slam last night. That was the real kind of, I think it put the nail in the coffin in that ball game. Blew the doors open on that one. If you get behind, you can't, especially 2-0. If you get behind 3-0, I'm okay with throwing a fastball down the middle. Because more times than not, especially with the bases loaded, like it was in that case. Now, in that case, I'm sorry, it was a 2-0 count that the home run was hit on. But when you get down 3-0, you can throw a pitch down the middle because 99.9% of the time, they're going to take that pitch. When you're down 2-0, that's a hitter's count. That's when they're going to sit back and just drive whatever you throw their way. The Grand Slam came on a pitch. When I say it was down the middle, I mean like if the strike zone it was truly in the dead center of the strike zone. Like it was just – we always call that center. It was middle. That was a middle pitch, and it got hit a very, very long way to blow this game open. And, of course, the Aggies ended up losing. Flush it. Forget it happened. There's always the next day. Now, the time I'm recording, the ball game, we should be about 20 minutes into the game. I haven't checked the score yet. Nathan Detmer is getting the start for the Aggies. I like that. I think he's going to have a good outing. Hopefully he's able to go deep. But it's win or go home. It's win or go home. And, of course, the Longhorns won their regional. I didn't know this. I found this out. Basically, the way this works is when you all are like when teams with the same seed, it's kind of like the board almost makes a decision in essence. So I don't think we're going to know who hosts yet. And like I said, I'm learning. I've been trying to learn. It's hard to find this information. So if the Aggies were to win this ball game, I don't know if they're going to host. If they were to lose, they're going home. So, your season's on the line. You got to put up or shut up. You got to go big or go home. And that's what this ball game is going to be for the Aggies. It's now or never. I'm going to come at you all with as many cringy analogies sayings as I can to lay it on the line of how big of a game this is. But, it's like I said, win or go home. That's it. That's the last one I'm going to say. You got to win this game. This team's hot. The bats are hot. The pitching has been not great, but it's gotten you to this point. So you got to hope that Detmer just comes out and shuts it down. If he's able to come shut it down and you put up a handful of runs, both teams have had to go deep. Stanford's had to play an extra handful of games, throw an extra handful of pitchers because of them being in the loser bracket. So, the Aggies are not in a bad spot. They're not in a bad spot. They just have to come and win this ball game. Now, the time you all are watching this, of course, we will know the outcome of this game. I hate that these games are so late because I wish I could bring you all the recap the next day. These games are just so late that it's just hard to do that. So this episode will be coming out on Tuesday. Of course, we will already know the outcome of the game. So then on Tuesday for Wednesday's episode, I'll break down whatever happened, whether that be the season coming to a close or the Aggies heading on to the super regional round. So we'll break it down either which way. But, one thing I've learned in life is Don't be stressed about these ball games. This is what's so fun about sports. It's what's fun about being a Texas A&M fan, is just being able to say, hey, we get to watch our team playing a game where if they win on the road in California against a dang good ball club in Stanford, they are going to get to play a super regional series against their rival, the Longhorns. And that is what makes this fun. Everybody enjoy the game. Hopefully it turns out well. Of course, like I said, when you all are watching this, you will know the outcome. But enjoy the game. It should be a fun one. I'm excited to go sit and watch it myself. Everybody have a great night. And that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. As always, I really appreciate you all tuning in. Hopefully we get a big baseball victory. We'll talk about it either which way. But that's going to do it. We will see you tomorrow.